Rimuru into the wonderful world. A Tensura times Konosuba crossover. By Tempest Moon. What if Rimuru, after the Great War had finally come to an end, found himself completely consumed by boredom? With no remaining threats, no urgent crises, and nothing fun left to occupy his time, the slime grew restless. Seeking something new, Rimuru decided to explore the endless wonders of the cosmos. As he journeyed across vast and unknown realms, a single, peculiar world caught his attention. There, amidst the chaotic and unpredictable nature of its inhabitants, a few specific individuals managed to truly intrigue him. And so begins the journey of a bored, almighty slime into a completely different, wonderful world. Chapter 7 Party Upgrades. Rimuru POV. Hey Kazuma, what's that cute-looking sword made of? I asked, pointing at the blade hanging from Kazuma's waist. He didn't respond immediately. He just stood there, hesitating to speak. I already knew what it was, and I knew it was mediocre compared to the rare weapons forged in Tempest, but I wanted to be polite for once. It took a moment of silence until Megumin spoke up. It's Chunchu Maru. What kind of name is that? I internally screamed while maintaining my usual expression. I pity the Demon King who gets defeated by a hero wielding a sword named Chunchu Maru. I don't know if it was done for fun, but I really hope he took it seriously when naming the weapon. To break the awkward silence, I added, from the looks of it, is that short sword made from a magically reinforced metal alloy? Kazuma nodded in response. That explains the sturdiness. Mana-imbued weapons are like Magicule-imbued weapons, although significantly weaker. Magicules are poisonous to humans due to their potent magical energy, so not everyone can harness their power. Meanwhile, mana is a diluted form of magicules found all over this world. Weapons forged using mana can be repaired with magic, whereas weapons forged using magicules gain self-regeneration capabilities and the potential to naturally evolve or even gain sentience. While pondering these concepts, I thought of something I could do to improve our party's combat level. Although my companions don't seem weak and their teamwork is balanced, a higher tier of weaponry could significantly improve our chances in battle. Furthermore, I almost forgot that this world functions differently from others. Earth has no magic, and the cardinal world operates on an infinite life cycle, but this world is built like an MMORPG. Despite its game-like structure, it runs naturally just like any other world. My point is, this world has a class system you can choose from, allowing you to pick skills based on your assigned class. It is oddly similar to the voice of the world granting skills whenever specific conditions are met. You can also level up by killing monsters, thereby improving your chosen skills. When I registered at the Adventurers Guild, I picked the Swordsman class. It's a common class, allowing me to blend in perfectly with the locals. I was pulled out of my internal monologue when Darkness addressed me. Rimuru-san, although I hope I am not bothering you, I would like to ask you to please behave in front of the royals after we arrive. What does she think of me? A child? I wondered, holding a bewildered expression. Seeing my reaction, Darkness quickly added, it's not that I think lightly of you. It's because these three made a mess, especially Kazuma, when we reached the royal palace last time. I am hoping such an incident never happens again. Kazuma felt insulted and chimed in. Hey, that's rude. For your information, my behavior was so impressive that Princess Iris decided to invite me to the royal palace. Darkness paid him no mind. Well, I'll try my best then, I simply assured her. I am the ruler of my own nation. I know how to present myself with dignity when the situation demands it. Royals and nobles alike are shrewd individuals who only act for their own benefit. Handling such people was my daily life back home, which is why I am confident Darkness's worries are unwarranted. Still, this will be my first time traveling far away from Axel. It should be fun. Kazuma POV. Oh, Iris. How much I've missed you. I kept practicing that line so I could say it when I meet my cute little adoptive sister. It's a hopeful dream, much like my other delusions, but I am the master of my own thoughts. No one can judge me except myself. I refuse to listen to anyone trying to tell me what common sense is or what is considered correct. I live life on my own terms, that's the Seitu Kazuma way. While preparing my gear, I glanced toward Aqua, who was mindlessly lounging on the couch. Sometimes I envy her simple outlook on life. Being an idiot can really take the edge off, you know? What was that? I feel like someone is talking behind my back. Aqua turned around and began searching the room. Dang it, that was close. Can she read minds too? Sometimes she really acts like a true deity. Then again, my opinion of Aqua is constantly shifting back and forth. I turned my attention toward Rimuru, who had been wearing a serious expression for a while now. She was probably nervous about meeting the nobility. I mean, who could blame her? Megumin, on the other hand, finished packing her belongings into a fairly large sack. She sat down at our dining chair and let out a heavy sigh. Seeing this, I decided to approach her. Not wanting to startle her, I called out as I walked over. Hey! I was thinking, if Iris wants me to stay at the palace for a couple of nights, I'm going to accept. Megumin looked up at me. She pondered for a moment before replying, well, if you're staying there, then I am staying with you. After all, we're partners, right? We can tell Princess Iris our heroic tales together. She offered a warm smile. I could neither agree nor disagree. I felt like any response might ignite a full-blown forest fire, which I desperately wanted to avoid. Thankfully, a saving grace arrived just in time. Rimuru walked over in our direction. Hey guys, I'm thinking of forging upgraded weapons for all of you. Her casual statement caught everyone by surprise. Feeling a bit hesitant, I asked, Rimuru-san, did you learn a smithing skill? Before replying, Rimuru pulled her adventurer card from her pocket. Yep. After defeating that dragon, I earned enough skill points. I took smithing, thinking it would complement my swordsman class nicely. A swordsman who uses high-tier magic. It was absurd, yet it was Rimuru. I didn't have the energy to question how that was possible, so I simply concluded that Rimuru must have learned holy magic along the way. Darkness overheard our conversation and chimed in. That's very kind of you, Rimuru-san, but I believe our current gear is already quite solid. She remained respectful as always. Rimuru waved her finger with a confident smirk. No, hear me out. Having superior weapons will significantly increase our overall potential. While mastery over your skills is essential, having weapons that amplify those techniques makes a massive difference. I couldn't argue with that. Megumin's explosion magic is devastating, but the drawback is her one-use limit per day due to complete mana exhaustion. When we fought the Demon King's army, I had to hoard high-grade manatite just to help her recover. If Rimuru could craft weapons that drastically reduce mana consumption while boosting spell output, our party's firepower would skyrocket. I had no objections, though I wondered how Rimuru planned to forge such weapons on short notice. Sensing my hesitation, Rimuru offered a reassuring smile. You don't have to worry about me. I'm doing this of my own free will. It's the least I can do for the team. I completely gave up trying to figure her out. She is far too generous. If I were anywhere near her level, I wouldn't hesitate to court her. Though if I tried that, Megumin would probably cast explosion on my bed while I slept. Suddenly, Rimuru pulled a full forge setup, a blacksmithing hammer and anvil, out of thin air. This left all of us stunned. We were supposed to leave for the capital soon, yet neither Darkness nor Megumin tried to stop her. We all gathered around to watch as she began her work. First, let me see that sword. I'm going to enhance it using a rare metal I found, Rimuru said, gesturing toward my blade. After I handed it over, my jaw dropped at the material she pulled out. Rimuru-san, is that mithril? Where on earth did you find that? Rimuru gave a quick response without looking up. I found it a few months ago while exploring a dungeon alone. There was a hidden cavern, and inside I mined these precious metals. She was so focused that her hands moved with absolute precision. Rimuru hammered the glowing, molten mithril directly into my blade. She recited magic incantations, causing glowing runic symbols to etch themselves onto the steel. Within 10 minutes, her work was complete, and I was utterly astounded by the result. This is incredible, Rimuru-san. The sword is actively absorbing ambient mana even when I'm not holding it, I exclaimed, inspecting my newly upgraded weapon. I had registered as a thief and marksman at the guild, but seeing this made me want to switch to a swordsman class on the spot. Next was Megumin. She was initially hesitant to hand over her cherished staff. After a few moments of persuasion, Megumin gave in, pleading, "If you break this, I will cry." This is the very first staff I obtained after leaving the Crimson Demon village, so it is extremely important to me. Rimuru maintained her friendly tone. "Don't worry, I won't break it." She then began working on the staff. From her spatial storage, Rimuru extracted a rare metal known as orichalcum along with a massive, high-purity mana core, seamlessly integrating them into Megumin's staff. 10 minutes later, the transformation was finished. There you go. Disregarding your own mana reserves, you can now cast Explosion as many times as you like, Rimuru casually stated, handing the staff back to Megumin. Rimuru-san, did you just say as many times as she likes? I asked, completely dumbfounded. If what she said was true, Rimuru had just unleashed a walking disaster upon the world. Looking at her calm expression, I realized I was the only one calculating the apocalyptic consequences of this upgrade. Rimuru explained further, the reason this is possible is that the staff now passively gathers ambient mana particles from the air at an exponential rate. It no longer relies solely on the caster's internal mana pool, so magical exhaustion is completely bypassed. Furthermore, the embedded mana core can store an infinite amount of magical energy, provided mana exists in this world. What kind of weapon of mass destruction did you just create? I wanted to scream at the utter absurdity of it. This made Megumin a greater threat to global security than the Demon King ever was. Hearing all of this, Megumin began grinning maniacally. She gripped her staff tightly, marveling at the newly engraved runes. Rimuru-san, what does this incantation over here mean? Megumin pointed to a series of glowing symbols along the wood. Rimuru pondered for a moment before answering, "Oh, that's an anti-theft enchantment. The staff recognizes only you as its true master. If any other mage attempts to channel magic through it, the spell will instantly backfire on them." Megumin burst into dramatic laughter. Her earlier hesitation was completely replaced by chaotic excitement. Aqua, who had been unusually silent throughout the entire process, approached Megumin and stared intently at the staff. After observing it for a moment, she looked up at Rimuru with a surprisingly serious expression. There was a subtle hint of unease in Aqua's voice as she asked, "Rimuru-san, who are you, really?" I sensed a deeper weight behind Aqua's question. Before I could interrupt, Aqua continued, "This item contains an absurd density of divine energy that I am completely unfamiliar with. It resembles standard mana on the surface, but its compressed nature is beyond anything from this realm." It was rare to see Aqua acting this sharp. Normally unbothered by anything short of minor inconveniences, she was now hyper-focused on the energy radiating from the staff. With a slightly defensive tone, Rimuru replied, "I don't know why you're questioning my identity, Aqua. I thought I already introduced myself when we met." Aqua didn't back down. "You're anomalous. Ever since we first met, I felt an otherworldly aura surrounding you. I just couldn't put it into words until now. Now that I thought about it, Aqua might actually be onto something. I had been so distracted by Rimuru's appearance that I overlooked her claims of being from Earth. I had assumed she was some former model given her looks, so I never pried into her past. But considering how effortlessly she destroyed those giant frogs and soloed a dragon, her combat capabilities were terrifying. If she was this powerful, why hadn't she defeated the Demon King herself?" Sensing the tense shift in the atmosphere, Rimuru let out a heavy sigh. "Look, you probably don't remember, but I actually met you, Aqua, a few years ago. You were the one who reincarnated me into this world with the task of defeating the Demon King. But after arriving, I chose to lie low. Why should I risk my life following the orders of a pushy goddess who couldn't handle the situation herself? And how absurd is it to expect a teenager who died by accident to single-handedly slay a world-ending threat? At first, Rimuru sounded sincere, but by the end of her speech, she was openly mocking Aqua's administrative incompetence. This instantly infuriated Aqua, who barked back, "What? Is that why you looked so familiar? So you're telling me that despite possessing all this power, you deliberately slacked off and ignored the Demon King? You shameless coward! Because of your negligence, I got dragged down to the mortal realm and forced to live in poverty with this unrefined shut-in. Now apologize to me, you." Slap! Who are you calling a shut-in? I'll have you know I am a respected adventurer, I shouted, smacking the back of her head to set the record straight. I was completely done with this argument. I didn't care about Rimuru's motives. Sure, her inaction meant the world suffered under the Demon King's threat a little longer, but the Demon King was dead now anyway. It was just wild realizing there were absurdly powerful entities casually wandering around the world under everyone's radar. Rimuru POV. Sile. We almost got exposed just now. There is no need to panic, Master. We could simply eliminate all witnesses if you desire. Why is that always your go-to solution? HMPH. I activated my thought acceleration as my mind raced. That was way too close. That useless goddess actually picked up on my anomaly. I suppose I can't blame her. I am an unregistered entity in her world system. Also, why did you make Megumin's staff so completely overpowered? If she goes wild, she could flatten a kingdom, and people will end up blaming me. Master, as a Manas, I strive for absolute perfection in all creations. I refuse to produce inferior craftsmanship, even for basic equipment. I can't believe how smug you sound about this. If she causes an international crisis, it's on your conscience. It is irrelevant. How she utilizes that power is entirely up to her. Consider it an experiment in human behavior. Furthermore, even if she channeled her maximum output, her spells could not inflict a single scratch upon Master. She really has no heart when it comes to these things, I lamented inwardly at my partner's ruthless logic. Fortunately, my improvised lie worked like a charm. I thought my peaceful vacation was about to end right then and there, but it seems I managed to clear suspicion for now. Still, I know this won't last forever. Lies have a habit of unraveling, but I just hope I can maintain this cover until my stay in this world comes to an end. Sheesh. I can't believe she actually fell for that excuse. Aqua really is a special case, I thought as I watched her continue her dramatic tantrum. Kazuma, thoroughly fed up with her whining, finally snapped. Hey! Stop crying, you idiot! The Demon King is already dead. There's no point yelling at Rimuru now. Aqua grabbed my shoulders, flailing her arms hysterically. It's because of you that I had to endure sleeping in a dirty stable next to horses and Kazuma's mess. If you had this kind of cheat power all along, you should have helped us fight. Say you're sorry. Tears were streaming down her face as she yelled right at me. I didn't even bother pushing her off. I just let her drown in her own confusion for the sake of my cover. There was no point altering my story now when it served as the perfect explanation. So, I doubled down on the act. Well, consider it payback for your terrible attitude back then. Besides, I must admit, watching your daily struggles from the sidelines was pretty entertaining. Aqua bawled even louder while Kazuma and Darkness sighed in sheer embarrassment. Whether this lie comes back to haunt me later, I have to stick to it now. After a few more minutes of shouting and complaining, we finally managed to pack our gear and leave Axel just as night fell. Aqua was still grumbling under her breath, but I paid her no attention. I'm not staying in this world permanently anyway. It's better for everyone if they accept my story as it is. It saves us all a lot of trouble. By the way, Sile, is it safe to assume the nobility summoning us to the capital have ulterior motives? High probability, Master. Additionally, the likelihood of your cover being blown increases once we arrive at the royal court. I advise preparing secondary logical explanations that will not contradict your current narrative. Right. That definitely complicates things. But revealing my true status as a demon lord from another dimension would cause a massive panic. As much as I dislike deception, revealing my true identity would send Aqua into a complete divine meltdown and draw unwanted attention from this world's gods. Keeping a low profile is the smartest path forward. Furthermore, Master, there is a high probability that your subordinates may cross dimensions to locate you. Should Lord Diablo arrive, concealing your identity will become mathematically impossible. That was a terrifyingly valid point. Diablo had been saying some concerning things through our magical communication link recently. Poor Varney is going to have a rough time handling him if he shows up. Well, I'm sure Varney can survive Diablo's enthusiasm. With those thoughts in mind, I looked out from the window of our horse-drawn carriage, gazing at the moonlit horizon as we quietly traveled into the night. Chapter 8 Secret Unveiled. Kazuma POV. We arrived in the capital city of Belzerg around dawn. The sun was slowly rising on the horizon, and the townspeople were starting to wake up. The girls, who had been fast asleep, opened their eyes and stretched with a yawn. It had been a short and peaceful journey. Last night, while the girls were huddled together, I chose to lie down near Megumin. The carriage was a bit small for all of us, so space was tight. I thought to myself, even though Rimuru-san kept watch all night with the driver, there's a chance she might have noticed something. A sudden surge of anxiety ran through me. When we entered the main gates of the capital, I walked up beside Rimuru and asked in a hushed voice, Rimuru-san. By any chance, you didn't notice anything unusual back in the carriage, right? She stopped walking, and so did the rest of my party. They all turned to look at me with blank expressions. Rimuru then spoke up. What are you talking about, Kazuma? Did you notice something back in the carriage? I couldn't answer her. I couldn't even get mad at her tone. I just had a sinking feeling that I was in trouble. Then, right on cue, Aqua was the next to speak. Now that you mention it, I feel like I was having a weird nightmare about someone hovering over us while we were asleep. Megumin tapped her chin thoughtfully. That's strange. I don't know why, but I feel a bit sore today, even though I didn't do any heavy lifting yesterday. Darkness chimed in as well. That really is odd. Did we all have a similar nightmare? For me, I felt like I couldn't move last night, and someone was breathing heavily nearby. Beads of cold sweat began rolling down my face. Was I about to be condemned right here on the spot? Before I could throw myself on the ground and beg for forgiveness, Rimuru looked at me and said, well, I guess Kazuma was having a bad nightmare too. Poor guy. Did someone disturb your sleep last night as well? Yes. It was horrible. Whoever did that deserves divine punishment. I nodded frantically, trying to hide my embarrassment. I'd much rather be called a liar than have them think poorly of me. Hopefully, they bought my excuse. We continued heading toward the royal palace, though Rimuru kept glancing back at me along the way. Darkness and Aqua went ahead to inform the guards of our arrival, while the three of us waited outside until our names were called. Rimuru, standing beside me, leaned in close and whispered in my ear, you sneaky guy. Don't ever do anything like that again, or I'll make sure you regret it. She offered a calm, terrifying smile as she stepped back. She is terrifying. Why is she so intimidating? I don't know what you mean by that, Rimuru-san, but you can trust that I will keep your words in mind, I replied as politely as I could. She finally dropped the subject, and right after that, the guard summoned us inside. Entering the palace, we were greeted by the curious gazes of the nobles lining the hall. Some looked calculating, while others were genuinely intrigued by us. Seated upon the throne was the king who rules Belzerg. At his side stood the first prince and Princess Iris. The king raised his hand, and the entire throne room fell dead silent. His gaze swept across our group before coming to a rest on Rimuru. great heroes who defeated the Demon King, the king's voice reverberated across the hall. I hear your achievement against that dragon was phenomenal. You have my deepest gratitude. Nobody dared interrupt the king. This was a grand rewarding ceremony for the adventurers who had protected the kingdom from the dragon's threat. Although Rimuru was the one who actually slew the beast, she didn't boast about it out loud. A few moments later, the king met my eyes. Seeing this, I bowed politely before him. He addressed me directly. Kazuma, Slayer of the Demon King. What reward may I offer you for your heroic achievements in this recent victory? I reined in my wild thoughts and maintained my composure. I replied respectfully, Your Majesty, it is our greatest honor to be recognized by you. However, if I may speak freely, the one who dealt the final blow to the dragon was not me, but our newest party member, Rimuru. I gestured toward her. That statement surprised the rest of my party, especially Aqua, who completely forgot her regal manners and began complaining loudly right in front of the king. Rimuru remained silent, simply pinching the bridge of her nose in exasperation. Aqua whined at me, What are you talking about? I dealt the most damage to that terrible dragon. Rimuru just stole the kill after I wore it down. That was completely absurd. I had seen with my own eyes how Aqua got dragged around by that dragon. Her attacks hadn't even left a scratch on it, yet here she was claiming she dealt the heavy blow. Smack! Before I could scold the goddess, Darkness surprisingly delivered a swift smack to the back of Aqua's head. Darkness's face was beet red, and tears of embarrassment formed in her eyes as she bowed profusely to the king, begging for forgiveness. The king burst out laughing. Bahama! What a lively party! Please, relax yourselves. You are the heroes who saved our world, so there is no need for such extreme modesty. He didn't know the half of it. The king then turned his attention to Rimuru. Young traveler, I hear that you defeated the dragon. I must admit, I did not see you during the Great War against the Demon King's forces. Rimuru bowed politely and replied, Your Majesty, forgive my absence. In all honesty, I spent most of my time traveling and exploring remote regions, avoiding the conflict. After the fall of the Demon King, I visited Axel to meet these famous heroes, and I gratefully accepted their invitation to join their party. The king stroked his chin thoughtfully. I see. You are a wandering traveler. Very well. However, rumors have circulated throughout my kingdom that you utilized holy magic far surpassing the capabilities of a standard archpriest. Seeing your majestic presence and blue hair, could you perhaps be the great goddess Aqua of the Axis Church? Aqua gasped in absolute outrage. She shrieked at the top of her lungs, Wait a minute. I am the goddess Aqua. How could she possibly be the goddess? The onlookers looked back and forth between Rimuru and Aqua. Sure, they shared a similar blue hair color, but their height, aura, and demeanor were completely different. Then, a noble watching from the sidelines shouted, I knew it. Those Axis cultists have been spreading false rumors that our beloved goddess Eris pads her chest, when in truth, their own supposed goddess is as flat as a board. He pointed directly at Rimuru. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, like a spark landing on gunpowder, the crowd erupted into chaos. Some nobles began fiercely defending the Axis faith, while others shouted in defense of the Eris faith. Aqua started wailing, while Darkness and Megumin buried their faces in their hands. Rimuru POV. It was absolute chaos. Aside from trying not to reveal my true identity, I had to deal with these absurd nobles. They were saying ridiculous things about Aqua while completely failing to recognize her right in front of them. Meanwhile, I had inadvertently become the center of everyone's attention. Damn it, I shouldn't have shown off during that dragon fight, I thought to myself. I regretted using disintegration. It was the highest form of holy magic, capable of obliterating high-ranking entities. What I hadn't realized was that holy magic of that magnitude is practically non-existent in this world. I knew people in Axel had mistaken me for Goddess Aqua, but I hadn't paid it much mind because the real Aqua was standing right next to me. What I failed to anticipate was how little respect people actually had for Aqua, to the point where they refused to believe she was a deity. Her reputation was just that terrible. As the chaos escalated, our party was escorted to a private reception area reserved by the king. As honored guests, we were provided with private rooms, fine garments, and refreshments. I retreated to my room to calm down and figure out my next move. There was a high chance things would get even more chaotic from here on out, and my peaceful vacation might be coming to an end. But before I leave, I might as well enjoy myself to the fullest. This time, I'm not going to hold back, I resolved internally. I'll cause a little mischief, fitting my old reputation. If they insist on thinking I'm Goddess Aqua, maybe I'll use that misunderstanding to tease the real one. Maybe before I leave, I'll even help Kazuma out and send him back to Japan. As I was brainstorming ways to handle Aqua, I heard a quiet commotion outside Kazuma's room across the hall. Glancing out the door, I spotted an unfamiliar figure. It was a young girl with short white hair, wearing adventurer gear. Master, that individual is the resident goddess of this world. Her name is Eris. Eris? What is a world overseer doing wandering around in the mortal realm? She is conducting reconnaissance. Initially, I attempted to adjust this world's causal fate so you would blend in seamlessly, Master. However, I calculated that further manipulation would cause greater dimensional instability. That sounds concerning. Are you saying my very presence here causes reality to bend? Correct. Even with your magicules fully suppressed, your existence alone passively alters the destiny of this world. It was inevitable that you would be noticed by local deities eventually. I see. Should I just head back to Tempest then? No. You may remain here a while longer, Master. The local laws have already adapted to your presence, so you should enjoy your stay until the end. All right, I'll trust your judgment. So, what should we do about Goddess Eris? She was currently speaking with Kazuma, wearing a concerned expression. It seemed she had already sensed an unusual presence nearby and was trying to investigate. Master, establishing direct contact with her poses no risk. I calculate she possesses sufficient intellect to understand your peaceful intentions. If Sile was confident, then there was no point in hiding from Eris. She certainly seemed far more competent than Aqua. I walked over to Kazuma's room and knocked on the door. Knock! Knock! I heard a sudden rustling from inside. They were clearly startled by the sudden knock. A few seconds later, Kazuma opened the door. He looked surprisingly nervous, but he quickly ushered me inside. I offered a polite greeting. Hello. Sorry to interrupt, I just wanted to speak with Kazuma for a moment. The white-haired girl stood up from the sofa, waved casually, and said, "It's fine. We were just finishing up anyway." With that, she slipped out of the room. Left alone with Kazuma, I noticed him trembling slightly as he sat on the sofa. I poured myself a cup of tea and sat down opposite him. Cold sweat was dripping down his neck. Before I could even speak, Kazuma stammered, Rimuru-san. Please don't tell anyone about what happened last night. I was just stressed out and made a mistake. I offered him a mischievous smile. Seeing my expression, Kazuma immediately dropped into a dramatic bow on the floor. Please, Rimuru-san. I don't want the party to kick me out, he pleaded. He was worrying over nothing, but I couldn't resist teasing him just a little bit. I took a slow sip of my tea and remained silent for a few moments, letting him squirm. Finally, I looked at him and said, "You were acting pretty suspicious last night, Kazuma." Glancing around like that while everyone was asleep wasn't very honorable. He sat there, utterly speechless. Realizing he had no leverage, he quickly tried to negotiate. "Rimuru-san, let's make a deal," he offered desperately. Curious, I played along. Oh? What kind of deal? His expression turned deadly serious. I'll give you a cut of the profits from my intellectual property business, around 4 billion Eris. In exchange, we sign a non-disclosure agreement. He actually had a draft contract ready in his pocket. I chuckled and replied, well, for billion eris is a lot of money, but why would I need that? Besides, I'm not going to turn you in anyway. He blinked, suddenly freezing in place. Wait, you're not. Seeing his panicked state, I decided to end the prank. Relax, Kazuma. I'm not going to tell anyone. In fact, I came in here to share something with you. That brought him back to his senses. He sat back up on the sofa and listened. You see, do you want to return to Japan eventually? I asked calmly. Kazuma hesitated. What do you mean? I took another sip of tea. I told you I was a traveler, right? Well, to be fair with our secrets, I'll tell you one of mine. I don't have any bad intentions toward you or your party. I originally came from Japan, just like you. He stared at me in complete shock. I continued, however, before I ended up in this world, I was reincarnated in a completely different dimension. There, I built a nation and protected my people, much like how you fought the Demon King here. Where are you going with this? He asked softly. I looked out the window. I'm just saying that if you ever truly desire to visit Japan again, I have the power to open a gateway. No strings attached. Though I doubt your friends here would let you leave so easily. Before Kazuma could respond, the white-haired girl materialized out of thin air right inside the room. Chris? What are you doing back here? Kazuma blurted out, trying to cover for her. Realizing there was no point in maintaining her cover, Chris, or rather, Eris, stepped forward. Don't bother, Kazuma. This person already knows who I truly am. Isn't that right? I smiled. Indeed. You've been observing us from the shadows for a while now, Goddess Eris. Are you that concerned about Kazuma? She remained composed and addressed me directly. Your playful demeanor won't distract me. Tell me who you truly are. I do not know your intentions, but your power does not belong to this realm. She was sharp. As the goddess overseeing this world, she was doing a far better job than Aqua. I felt relieved knowing at least one local deity was competent. Goddess Eris, I applaud you for taking your duties seriously, I said, leaning back. But it's a bit hurtful that you don't recognize a fellow high-ranking existence. She stared at me in confusion until realization suddenly struck her face. Her eyes widened in sheer disbelief. No way. It can't be. Why would a supreme being of creation descend to this mortal dimension? I couldn't help but laugh softly. Foo-foo. It seems you figured it out. There's no point in hiding it anymore. My name is Rimuru Tempest. Eris began trembling, while Kazuma looked back and forth between us, completely lost. A Rimuru Tempest. The supreme ruler of the void, she asked, her voice shaking. Yep. I came here simply to take a peaceful vacation, but it seems my presence is causing quite a stir, I said, scratching my head. Eris immediately dropped to one knee and bowed respectfully. Forgive my ignorance. Had I known of your arrival, I would have personally welcomed you to our realm. Whoa, Lady Eris. What is happening right now? Am I dreaming? Kazuma stammered, his brain completely short-circuiting. Rise, Eris. You've done nothing wrong. I'll be leaving this world soon anyway, so please don't worry, I reassured her. Trying to make up elaborate excuses in front of a perceptive goddess would only lead to more complications. Coming clean was the best choice for everyone involved. Eris POV. I can't believe this. Am I dreaming? As guardians tasked with overseeing mortal worlds, we follow a strict divine hierarchy. Throughout my existence, I have heard ancient legends in the celestial realm about the primordial beings, entities that exist on a dimensional plane far above our own. They are absolute existences capable of creating and reshaping reality at will. Standing before me was not a mere mortal or high priest, but a supreme deity whose power dwarfed our entire pantheon. Yet, he was casually sitting on a couch, claiming he just wanted to enjoy a quiet vacation as an adventurer. What should I do? If a being of this scale were to become angry, this entire universe could be erased in an instant. Their existence was considered myth even among gods. But seeing him in person made reality hit with terrifying force. For a young goddess like me who had just secured peace after the Demon King's defeat, this was easily the most nerve-wracking moment of my life. Deciding it was best to protect Kazuma's sanity, I cast a gentle sleep spell on him, causing him to slump peacefully onto the sofa. There was no need for a mortal to carry the overwhelming weight of this cosmic truth. Rimuru watched calmly as I finished my spell, offering no objection. "Lord Rimuru, I apologize for disrupting your leisure," I said, bowing deeply once more. "Please enjoy the rest of your stay in our world. I shall not interfere with your travels." In a flash of light, I teleported back to the celestial realm. "Oh, Kazuma, why do you always end up in the middle of such impossible situations?" Knowing the magnitude of the situation, I immediately summoned the senior gods to report the presence of the void dragon in our realm. Third-person POV. Rimuru picked up Kazuma's sleeping form and placed him comfortably on his bed. Before leaving the room, Rimuru left a signed note on the desk, reassuring Kazuma that his secrets were safe and agreeing to the terms of his business contract. Meanwhile, in a higher realm, a council of senior deities was thrown into utter chaos upon receiving Eris's report. "What are we to do?" "We are talking about an existence comparable to the great dragon of creation," exclaimed a handsome deity clad in golden armor. "Nonsense," shouted an older god with a long white beard. "Eris must be mistaken. There is no way a supreme being would wander into a lower mortal realm unannounced." "But what if she is telling the truth?" argued a goddess of beauty. "What if Rimuru Tempest truly walks among mortals in that world?" The deities debated heatedly back and forth, unable to reach a consensus. Finally, the chief deity seated at the head of the table raised his hand, commanding absolute silence. He wore a crown of starlight, and his majestic robe shimmered with celestial energy. "Whether the supreme being has descended or not, we must investigate this matter with the utmost respect," he declared firmly. A young goddess stepping forward offered, "I shall volunteer. I will descend to Eris's realm and verify the truth immediately." The council agreed. The chief deity nodded solemnly. "Very well, a start. Go, and confirm the situation." The gods remained skeptical. If a supreme entity were present in that realm, why couldn't they perceive his aura through their divine mirrors? Beings of that scale possessed energy capable of birthing universes, yet their scrying pools showed nothing unusual. Astarte began her journey. Traversing the dimensional boundaries, she arrived in the mortal world governed by Eris in a matter of seconds. It was only upon stepping into the world that she felt it, a vast, infinite presence completely masked behind a gentle mortal disguise. The legends were true. The void dragon, Rimuru Tempest, was indeed taking a vacation. Chapter 9: The Height of Arrogance. Rimuru POV. Master. The gods of this world are becoming a nuisance. I was walking along the palace hallway when my partner suddenly informed me through thought transmission. She told me that Eris had informed the higher deities of my presence, and now they were eager to investigate me. Oh man. So much for keeping a low profile, I sighed in disappointment. I couldn't really blame Eris. It was her duty to report unusual occurrences in her domain to her superiors. I had just hoped she might leave out the part about me being here, but I suppose that was wishful thinking. So? Are they going to barge in here and ruin my vacation? Negative. Eris is currently managing the goddess assigned to investigate. Should they interfere further, I will obliterate their realm and construct new deities as administrators. Yikes. Talk about extreme. But I appreciate the sentiment. For now, the situation was under control. Aside from the higher gods and the greater demon Vani, no one else in this world knew my true identity. This was the best possible outcome for the time being. I continued down the hall until I reached the grand dining room. Evening had set in after my brief encounter with Eris. Kazuma was still asleep in his room, so I hadn't bothered waking him. Aqua, Megumin and Darkness were already seated at our assigned table, waiting for dinner to be served. Since the king was attending to royal matters, only our party and a few visiting nobles occupied the hall tonight. "Hey guys. Sorry for the delay." Kazuma was fast asleep, so I decided to let him rest, I said as I took a seat beside Megumin. Megumin was entirely focused on a roasted chicken sitting in front of her. On my other side sat Darkness, who was acting remarkably refined, a stark contrast to her usual behavior at the mansion. The spread of food was incredible, and I certainly wasn't going to hold back. Before digging in, I turned to Darkness and whispered, "I knew you were from a high family, but seeing your family's influence firsthand is impressive." She wiped her mouth with a napkin before replying politely, "Thank you. My father and ancestors worked tirelessly to earn our standing. I am simply fortunate to inherit the privileges of their hard work." I chuckled softly and leaned in closer. "You can be quite modest when you want to be, huh? Why are you bringing that up now?" she murmured in a hushed tone, maintaining her graceful posture. Aqua, who was already dizzy from drinking too much wine, slurred loudly, "That's enough talking. Let's eat." She clumsily attempted to serve herself a portion of curry, making a complete mess of her plate in the process. Several nearby nobles glanced over in disgust, and I couldn't help but feel embarrassed by her lack of decorum. "Good grief, Kazuma. Is this what you have to deal with every single day?" Suddenly, a young noble approached our table. He was dressed in an excessively costly suit adorned with shiny gems, and a golden watch gleamed on his wrist. He stopped behind my chair and cleared his throat. "Arrogance. Rimuru, was it? I happen to have a spare moment, so I suppose I could grant you the honor of a dance." "Who does this guy think he is?" I thought. Asking for a dance with such insufferable arrogance was beyond rude. "Do not worry, master. His soul has already been marked for total erasure." "Whoa, let's not go that far," I communicated back, choosing not to scold my partner further. I turned to the man and offered a polite decline. "I appreciate the offer, but I must respectfully decline. Please ask someone else." The noble's face flushed with anger. He grabbed my shoulder and forced me to turn around. "How dare you? Do you have any idea who I am? I am the son of a marquis in this kingdom. Learn your place, commoner." Classic noble behavior, I chuckled inwardly at the cliché. I kept my composure and replied calmly, "As the son of a marquis, shouldn't you demonstrate better manners than the rest of us?" By now, the entire dining hall had gone quiet. The surrounding nobles watched the confrontation with keen interest. If this turned physical and I retaliated, I might be accused of treason against the kingdom. On the other hand, if I let him push us around, people would look down on our party and question our credentials. It was obvious this noble was intentionally trying to test our boundaries. What a hassle. Just when I thought I could enjoy a quiet meal. He raised his hand as if to strike me, but before I could react, Darkness stepped in and grabbed his wrist with a vice-like grip. Darkness glared at him sternly. "So Richard, by order of the king, these individuals are honored guests. Are you attempting to humiliate the royal house by causing a scene?" Richard winced at the immense strength in her grip. The golden watch on his wrist cracked under the pressure, causing his temper to flare even further. "My watch! That cost 500,000 eris, he yelled furiously. Darkness didn't flinch. "You care more about a piece of jewelry than insulting the king's guests. How foolish can you be?" Her sharp words resonated throughout the hall, demonstrating the authority of her noble bloodline. Despite her personal quirks, Darkness belonged to the House of Dustiness, one of the most influential families in the realm. Even a marquis's son had to tread lightly around her. Richard sneered bitterly as he yanked his arm back. "You will regret this. Especially you, Rimuru. Don't think for a second I believe those fake stories about your achievements. To the nobility, commoners like you will always be nothing." It was an empty threat, but it was almost entertaining. I was almost curious to see what kind of foolish scheme this man would try next. The tension in the room eventually settled as Richard stormed off, leaving the rest of the guests to whisper amongst themselves. Kazuma POV. I woke up in my room and found a signed agreement resting on the desk. Rimuru had agreed to keep quiet about last night in exchange for 4.2 billion eris from my business profits. It hurts to lose that much money, but keeping my reputation intact is worth every single copper. As long as Rimuru kept her word, I could live with it. My stomach rumbled loudly, reminding me that I hadn't eaten since yesterday. I stretched and decided to make my way toward the dining hall. Along the corridor, I passed a young noble wearing a gem-studded suit. On his wrist was a custom wristwatch, a design I had originally patented and sold. He looked furious as he marched down the hallway accompanied by several armored guards, so I decided to give him a wide berth. Suddenly, a heavy sack was thrown over my head, and my arms were pinned behind my back. Wait, what? I'm being kidnapped. Before I could process what was happening, the guards bound my hands and dragged me down a series of dark stairwells. Moments later, I heard the arrogant voice of the young noble laughing maliciously. He placed a hand on my head and sneered, I knew it. Your entire party is nothing but a bunch of frauds. If capturing the so-called party leader is this easy, taking care of that Rimuru woman will be a walk in the park. What is this guy's problem with us? I thought, completely bewildered. I had literally just woken up, and now I was being dragged into some nobleman's petty vendetta. He continued gloating. Once I handle you, I'll make sure your party members learn their proper place. Is this guy completely out of his mind? I wondered. Did he seriously think he could handle Megumin's explosions, Darkness's physical durability, or Rimuru's terrifying power? He was walking straight into a nightmare without even realizing it. Eventually, the sack was pulled off my head. I found myself tied to a wooden chair in a dark, damp underground cellar illuminated only by candles. I could have easily escaped using my lurk and stealth skills, but I wanted to hear why this idiot had targeted me first. Richard pulled up a chair and sat directly across from me with a smug expression. He leaned in and demanded, "Tell me, you filthy commoner, how did a nobody like you manage to gain so much influence?" I stared at him in utter disbelief. What kind of ridiculous question is that? Are you just some power-tripping noble who can't handle people succeeding without you? Smack! He struck me across the face and wiped his hand in disgust. Don't play dumb with me. Rumors are circulating all across the capital about your party's bizarre behavior. Many people believe your claim about defeating the Demon King is a complete lie, and that the Dragon Knight Mitsurugi was the real savior. Where are these ridiculous rumors even coming from? And why is he bringing up Mitsurugi? Dealing with my party was already a daily headache. Megumin's explosion addiction gave me ulcers, Aqua's debt constantly ruined my finances, and if I ever crossed Rimuru, I'd probably be erased from existence. And here this noble was, convincing himself that I was some mastermind. Seeing my silence, Richard grew even more agitated. Admit it. You're nothing but a fraud taking credit for things you never did. This guy was insufferable. He didn't care about the truth, he just wanted me to validate his delusional worldview. I scoffed and replied, think whatever you want, man. But if you think my party is soft, you're in for a very rude awakening. Smack! He punched me again, sending my chair tilting back. You lying scum! Just then, one of the guards stepped forward cautiously. So Richard, perhaps we shouldn't push this too far. The king's guards are searching the premises. Richard turned on his guard furiously. Silence! Know your place. I am interrogating this prisoner. He turned back to me, his eyes filled with spite. That member of your party, Rimuru, she had the audacity to reject my offer to dance in front of everyone. She humiliated me. I will make sure she pays for disrespecting nobility. Despite the swelling on my cheek, I couldn't help but laugh out loud. Phut! Ha ha ha! Wow! People call me trash, but you take the entire dump. Richard exploded with rage. How dare you laugh at me? I am the son of a marquis. A pillar of this kingdom. You're so proud of a title you didn't even earn, I mocked him. Your attitude is worse than a wild animal's. Incensed, Richard raised his fist to strike me again. But before his punch could land. Boom! A massive explosion blew the heavy cellar door completely off its hinges. Dust and debris filled the room as three figures stepped through the smoke. It was Aqua, Megumin, and Rimuru. Well, well. Kidnapping a guest of the king is a serious crime, wouldn't you say? Rimuru said with a calm, dangerous smile. Megumin raised her staff, her eye glowing brightly. Aqua, prepare your healing spells. I am going to turn this cellar into ash. Hey! Don't cast explosion in an enclosed room. I'm tied to a chair, you idiot. I screamed at the top of my lungs. Richard panicked initially, but then he regained his composure and laughed maniacally. He gestured to his heavily armored guards, who drew their swords and surrounded the trio. Ha! You fools walked right into my trap. Richard declared proudly. Knights, eliminate them. The guards hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the order, but their duty to a high-ranking noble compelled them to draw their weapons. Surrender immediately, one knight commanded Rimuru. Rimuru simply smirked. Oh? You think I'm trapped in here with you? You've got it backwards. You're trapped in here with me. A sudden, intense pressure filled the room. A powerful gust of wind swept through the cellar, forcing the guards onto their knees and knocking Richard off his feet. The sheer weight of Rimuru's presence was suffocating. When the dust settled, the guards were completely disarmed, and Richard was trembling uncontrollably on the floor. Megumin hurried over to untie my ropes. Are you all right, Kazuma? Did these bad men hurt you? Aqua crossed her arms and began lecturing me immediately. This is what happens when you go wandering off on your own. If Rimuru hadn't tracked your location, who knows what would have happened to you? Yeah, thank you, I muttered, rubbing my sore wrists. Moments later, darkness burst into the room accompanied by a squadron of royal guards. So Richard, your actions today constitute high treason against the crown. Darkness announced with absolute authority. Royal guards, arrest this man. Seeing his own guards yield to darkness, Richard lost his mind completely. He clutched his hair and shrieked, "What are you doing? I am your superior. Attack them." Nobody moved. The royal guards promptly placed Richard in heavy magic suppressing cuffs. I walked over to Richard, looked down at his terrified face, and offered a smug grin. Looks like your noble status couldn't save you from your own stupidity. Enjoy the dungeon, buddy. Darkness ordered, take him to the High Court. The king will decide his fate. Third-person POV. 2 days later, the High Court of the Belzog Kingdom was convened. Kazuma and his party stood on one side of the Grand Hall, while Richard stood in the center, bound in chains. Upon the high throne sat the king, looking down at the accused with absolute sternness. How do you answer for these charges, Richard? The king demanded, his voice echoing through the massive hall. Richard held his head high, attempting to maintain an aura of aristocratic dignity. Your Majesty! I was merely defending my family's honor. During the banquet, Lady Rimuru publicly humiliated me when I offered a polite gesture. I simply brought their leader in for questioning to resolve the matter quietly, but these commoners used force to detain me. The assembled nobles whispered among themselves. Several bruised marks were visible on Richard's face, making him look like the victim to those who favored the nobility over common adventurers. Aqua couldn't contain herself any longer. She stood up and pointed an accusing finger at him. You absolute liar! You kidnapped Kazuma out of spite because you got rejected. I'll personally. Gavel strike. Order in the court, the chief magistrate bellowed. Darkness quickly pulled Aqua back into her seat and covered her mouth. A murmur of hostility rippled through the noble faction. Despite the party's reported victory over the Demon King's forces, many aristocrats resented commoners receiving royal favor. They had hoped the first prince would receive the glory, not a group of eccentric adventurers from Axel. Sir Richard was only defending his honor, one noble shouted from the gallery. Indeed! Commoners should not be permitted to strike nobility, another chimed in. The noble faction rallied behind Richard, attempting to pressure the crown into dismissing the charges. The king raised his hand, instantly restoring order to the chamber. He looked over at Rimuru and sighed softly. This situation has become far more complicated than intended. However, as king, I shall deliver a fair judgment regardless of political pressure. Richard's eyes widened in disbelief. Your Majesty! You cannot side with commoners over your own nobility. That is unjust. A collective gasp echoed across the court. Arguing directly against the king's decree was tantamount to treason. The king's expression darkened. Are you implying that my judgment is flawed, Richard? Richard bowed hastily, though his tone remained defiant. I mean no disrespect, Your Majesty. But my family has served this kingdom for generations. This entire incident could have been avoided if this commoner had simply shown proper respect. Richard genuinely believed that the noble faction support would protect him from severe punishment. He believed his status made him untouchable. He was entirely unaware that the person he had insulted was not a commoner, nor a mere adventurer, but an existence that transcended the concepts of mortal kingdoms and divine pantheons. At that exact moment, Rimuru released a microscopic fraction of her true aura. An overwhelming, suffocating pressure instantly swept through the entire courtroom. It wasn't the violent aura of a monster, but a profound, absolute divinity that rendered every single person in the room completely motionless. The air grew heavy, the temperature plunged, and an ethereal glow radiated softly around Rimuru. The arrogant nobles, the guards, and even the king froze in sheer awe and terror. In that fleeting second, every soul present realized that an absolute force had descended upon them. Chapter 10 Looming Danger. Rimuru POV. This noble had been blabbing endlessly about how my rejection was the cause of this entire mess. If I hadn't tracked Kazuma's soul earlier, he would have been in far greater danger. Should I just recreate this world and remove his existence entirely? Affirmative. I can recreate this world while isolating that fool soul in the great abyss. Stop. I'm joking. Don't actually do that. Sile's offer was certainly tempting, but doing that would make this entire vacation pointless. I didn't come here to rewrite reality. I just wanted to relax and have fun, though trouble seems to follow me wherever I go. You know what? If the king is questioning my presence, I might as well give him a clear answer. Do as you wish, master. There was a slight pause in my partner's response, but I didn't dwell on it. With a swift motion, I allowed my aura to flare outwards, enveloping the entire court in a divine pressure. Aqua, standing right beside me, widened her eyes in shock. This divine energy. I knew there was something strange about you, she muttered, staring at me in disbelief. The nobles, especially Richard, trembled under the sheer density of the atmosphere. I hadn't wanted things to escalate this far, but here we were. The king stood up from his throne, utterly stunned. Impossible. Could it be? Are you truly a divine being? I offered a slight smile before responding. Whether I am a deity or not, your subordinates have shown terrible hospitality. To treat the heroes who saved humanity from the Demon King with such contempt is appalling. Several nobles on the sidelines stood up and began shouting accusations at me, their words filled with malice. One of them even threw a heavy ledger in our direction, but it bounced harmlessly off my protective barrier. The king remained silent, carefully observing the room. Even if he had doubts, my sheer presence was more than enough to prove my point. Enough, the king's booming voice resonated through the hall, instantly silencing the crowd. I apologize on behalf of my court for their unruly behavior. Rest assured, justice will be served. The nobles trembled as the king delivered his final judgment. A royal verdict was absolute. But I wasn't quite done yet. If things had already gone this far, I decided to make a lasting impression before leaving. There was no point in hiding anymore. I stepped away from our seats and walked toward the center of the hall, standing with total confidence before the king and Richard. "I will no longer tolerate this," I said, my voice echoing coldly. "This man claims he was insulted by me, so perhaps I should make his claims a reality. For adventurers who traveled all this way to help, this treatment is disgraceful. Tell me, Richard, how do you prefer to answer for your actions?" My words were icy. A small, petty individual like Richard didn't deserve my time, but my stay in this world was nearing its end anyway. Taking Kazuma and his party away from this political mess seemed like the best option. Sweat poured down the faces of the aristocrats. Under the crushing weight of my aura, they finally realized I was no mere commoner girl who got lucky against a dragon. Standing before them was an existence far beyond their comprehension. Richard finally sensed the sheer magnitude of his mistake, but it was far too late. He had ruined my peaceful trip, and now he was facing the consequences. "Forgive my foolishness," Richard stammered, dropping to his knees and bowing frantically. "I thought the rumors were false. I never intended to offend a divine presence." "It's a bit late for apologies," I replied calmly. Before things could escalate further, the king intervened respectfully. "Lady Rimuru, please. You are clearly a higher entity who has descended to our realm. If you can find it in your heart to leave this insolent man to us, I assure you he will face the full extent of our laws. A noble entity should not have to deal with such matters personally." He made a valid point. Tormenting a minor noble forever felt a bit excessive, and I didn't want to play the villain over something so petty. I looked at the king and nodded. "Very well. I will leave his punishment, and the punishment of those who supported him, in your hands. But if I hear that justice was not carried out, I will return to handle it myself." Despite my blunt warning, no one dared to argue. The entire room remained dead silent as I turned toward the exit. A brand new set of rumors was bound to spread after today. Seeing that the matter was resolved, Kazuma and the rest of our party followed me out of the court. Aqua POV. I couldn't believe what I had just witnessed. That was a vast, nearly infinite reservoir of divine energy that completely dwarfed my own. I had failed to notice it before, but now I was certain. Despite her claims of being an otherworlder, Rimuru was definitely a goddess I had never heard of. First Eris gets all the attention, and now another random goddess shows up to steal my spotlight. I thought angrily. I couldn't fathom why Rimuru had come to this world in the first place. The Demon King was already defeated, and the realm was peaceful. There was no reason for another deity to descend unless she was specifically trying to annoy me. Unable to hold back my frustration, I stomped up to Rimuru as we walked down the hall. "Hey! I'm your senior around here, you know." I puffed out my chest and walked with all the authority I could muster, determined to establish boundaries and show her who was really in charge. Kazuma POV. Why are girls with light blue hair always so much trouble? The image I previously had of Rimuru was completely shattered. I could no longer view her as just a cute, soft-spoken kid who was self-conscious about her appearance. What she displayed in that courtroom was absolute, terrifying dominance. I had been hoping to meet Princess Iris while we were at the palace, but that opportunity was completely blown. Dang it! I can't even break my non-disclosure contract with Rimuru, or she'll probably turn me into dust, I wept internally. After the reward ceremony concluded, we prepared to head back to Axel. There was nothing left for us in the capital except unwanted attention. Our party's reputation, which was already questionable, had taken another weird turn. The journey back was fairly lively, as a group of merchant carriages and fellow adventurers tagged along for safety. I glanced over at Rimuru, who seemed deep in thought. The carriage we rented this time was spacious and comfortable, giving everyone plenty of legroom. I leaned back in my corner while the girls chatted among themselves. Suddenly, Rimuru looked over at me and asked directly, "Kazuma, do you still wish to return to Japan?" I paused, thinking carefully about my answer. If she had asked me when I was first summoned to this world, I would have said yes without hesitation. But things were different now. I had a home, reliable income, and genuine friends. Adventure here was chaotic, but it beat sitting in a dark room playing video games all day. I had found actual fulfillment in this world. I looked Rimuru in the eye and answered with firm conviction. No. I miss my parents sometimes, but I've made up my mind to live here. Besides, I helped save this world from the Demon King, remember? Rimuru giggled softly. Aqua and the others watched our conversation in silence. Then Aqua squinted at Rimuru suspiciously. By the way, why is a goddess like you wandering around the mortal realm anyway? Aren't you supposed to be managing your own domain? Rimuru shrugged gently. I'm just taking a vacation. Besides, why are you so upset with me? Aqua crossed her arms and pouted. Because you showed up out of nowhere and stole my attention. Now everyone thinks you are the goddess. Why shouldn't I be mad? So Rimuru really is a high-tier goddess, huh? I thought to myself. I had been skeptical at first, but if even Aqua recognized her divine energy, it had to be true. Her ridiculous power and calm demeanor certainly didn't belong to a normal adventurer. I interrupted their arguing. Wait, Rimuru. You mentioned earlier that you could open a portal back to Earth, right? If I ever changed my mind, could I bring Megumin and Darkness with me? Rimuru tilted her head thoughtfully. Well, traveling across dimensions with extra people can be tricky, but I'm sure Sile and I could figure out a way to make it work. Aqua immediately jumped in, pointing a finger at her. Hey! It's already bad enough that you're meddling in the mortal realm, but now you're talking about dimension hopping with a NEET. Are you crazy? The celestial hierarchy will strip your divine status if you keep breaking rules. Surprisingly, Rimuru didn't bother arguing with Aqua. Either way, it was just a hypothetical question. The chances of me ever seeing my family again were basically zero, so I wasn't going to get my hopes up. Darkness, who had been listening quietly, turned to Rimuru and asked, Rimuru, are you saying you aren't the real goddess Aqua? Aqua immediately burst into tears and began patting Darkness's armor repeatedly. Why are you being so mean? I've been your archpriest this whole time. Darkness barely felt Aqua's tearful thumps due to her high defense. She calmly caught Aqua's hands and smiled. I was only joking. Regardless, having someone with Rimuru's incredible divine capabilities in our party will certainly make future quests much safer. It was clear Darkness wasn't fully processing the cosmic scale of what was being discussed, but I couldn't blame her. Accepting that two goddesses were casually riding in the same carriage was a lot for anyone to take in. Suddenly, the merchants driving the lead carriages began shouting in panic. The entire convoy ground to a halt. I immediately leaned out the window and activated my enemy detection and farsight skills. Scanning the clear blue sky, my eyes widened in horror. Holy cow! There's a massive flock of wyverns heading right for us. I yelled. Everyone get out and form a defensive line. We scrambled out of the carriage into the open field. The other adventurers pulled out their weapons, preparing for a brutal fight. Out in the open like this, there was nowhere to hide, so standing our ground was our only option. While I was busy sweating bullets, Rimuru walked over to Megumin and tapped her staff. Hey, Megumin! Wouldn't this be the perfect opportunity to test out your upgraded staff? I shuddered at the thought. Megumin's standard explosion magic was already destructive enough to level a fortress. If her upgraded staff amplified that power, the results were going to be terrifying. Megumin's eyes sparkled with pure excitement. She puffed out her chest, gripped her newly modified staff with both hands, and stepped to the front of the defensive line. The local adventurers, recognizing her signature stance, immediately scattered and ran for cover. They were clearly more terrified of Megumin than the incoming wyverns. Megumin raised her staff to the sky and began her chant. O mighty flames that devour even the specks of dust, I implore you to grant me your absolute power. Scorch my foes and reduce their very existence to ash. Explosion! The sky darkened instantly as dozens of massive crimson magic circles materialized above the clouds. Like a coordinated orbital strike, beams of concentrated destruction rained down upon the wyvern flock. Boom! 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 The wyverns exploded mid-air like firecrackers, leaving nothing behind but falling ash. Massive craters opened up across the distant hillside from the sheer impact of the shockwaves. When the smoke cleared, not a single monster remained. Megumin stood tall, panting slightly, but to my absolute shock, she hadn't collapsed from mana exhaustion. The new staff had completely offset her casting cost. That weapon is way too dangerous, I thought, backing away slowly. Rimuru clapped her hands cheerfully and patted Megumin on the shoulder, looking like a proud mentor. Darkness and Aqua stood frozen in absolute awe at the catastrophic power display. If we had possessed this kind of firepower during the war against the Demon King's army, the fight would have been over in 5 seconds. At that moment, I made a solemn promise to myself, I would never, ever make Megumin angry. Third-person POV. In a dimly lit underground hideout far from the capital, Richard sat at a round stone table surrounded by rogue mags and mercenary captains. Following the trial, the king had issued a royal decree stripping Richard of his noble title, seizing his assets, and expelling him from the House of Marquis. He was officially an outcast, left with nothing. However, Richard had not lost everything. Over the years, he had quietly siphoned vast sums of money into secret offshore accounts. His greed and bitterness consumed him. He refused to accept his defeat, convincing himself that Rimuru was merely a fraud who used high-level illusion magic to trick the royal court. He vowed to make her pay for humiliating him. The time has come, Richard sneered, his face twisted with malice. We shall awaken the ancient power from its slumber. In the center of the chamber rested a massive dragon egg covered in glowing, dark runes. This was no ordinary monster egg, it was the rare offspring of a calamity dragon, recovered from a hidden cavern deep within the mountains. Through his underground connections, Richard had acquired the egg and hired dark mags to conduct an forbidden ritual. My lord, the summoning circle is complete. We are ready to proceed, the lead dark mage reported. Richard grinned wickedly. Commence the ritual. We shall fuse the essence of a greater demon with this dragon egg. With this ultimate beast under my command, I will reclaim everything that was taken from me. The dark mags raised their staves and began chanting in an ancient, forbidden language. Hear our call, great entity of the abyss. Inhabit this vessel and manifest your might upon the world. We summon you, Duke of Hell. A surge of dark purple energy erupted from the magic circle, cracking the stone floor. The air turned freezing cold as a terrifying silhouette emerged within the flames. The entity chuckled darkly, its glowing red eye sweeping over the cultists. Foo foo foo. A suitable dragon vessel? Very well. I accept your contract. In exchange for this flesh, I shall serve as your weapon until your life ends. Richard was ecstatic. The ritual was a complete success. He had bound a high-ranking demon to his command. The fusion process was instantaneous. The dark mana surged into the egg, causing it to hatch immediately. A dense shroud of dark energy enveloped the newborn creature before condensing into a tall, slender humanoid form brimming with catastrophic power. The entity was reborn as a demonic dragon king, a disaster-class threat far surpassing standard monsters. The entity bowed gracefully before Richard. I await your commands, Master. Excellent. Richard declared proudly. I grant you the name Desmond. Upon receiving a name, Desmond's aura expanded exponentially, stabilizing his tremendous power. The mercenary captains and mags backed away in absolute terror, realizing they had birthed a monster capable of threatening entire kingdoms. To test his power, Desmond raised a single finger. Without chanting, he released a tiny beam of dark energy toward a nearby stone pillar. The beam vaporized the stone instantly, blowing a hole straight through the cavern wall and into the mountain outside. The sheer destructive force easily rivaled top-tier offensive magic. Richard laughed hysterically at the sight. With Desmond by his side, he believed no one could stop him, not the king's guards, not the royal knights, and certainly not Rimuru. Even if those archpriests combine their strength, they won't stand a chance against Desmond. Richard thought, a sinister smile spreading across his face. A new threat was looming over the realm, a catastrophic beast guided by a man consumed by vengeance and delusion. Chapter 11 Calm Before the Storm. Third-person POV. The party made it back to Axel in short order, arriving around night-time. Exhausted from the long journey, everyone quickly retired to their respective rooms to get some well-deserved rest. Kazuma stretched his arms and prepared his bed. After changing into his pajamas, he tucked himself under the covers and closed his eyes. A few minutes passed before he felt a soft presence nearby. Assuming it was a pillow, he reached over and pulled it close, only to hear a quiet gasp that startled him awake. Sensing something was off, Kazuma opened his eyes and saw Megumin staring back at him, her face completely red. What are you doing in here?" Kazuma asked, trying to remain composed. Megumin looked away, nervously twirling a lock of hair before answering softly. "I was feeling a bit lonely tonight, so I came in here." She was being remarkably honest, but Kazuma was instantly suspicious that some kind of prank was being pulled on him. He sat up slowly, keeping his distance to avoid making things awkward. Trying to keep his composure, Kazuma offered quietly, "Megumin, if you want to stay, we can just sit and talk for a while." I don't mind whatever you want to do," she mumbled nervously. Both of their hearts were pounding in the quiet room. The atmosphere was filled with tension, and neither of them knew quite what to say next. Taking a cautious breath, Kazuma reached out and sat beside her on the bed. Megumin didn't pull away, simply closing her eyes in anticipation. It felt like a rare, quiet moment between them, until... "Kazuma!" A loud voice yelled from the hallway as the bedroom door was suddenly kicked wide open. The peaceful mood shattered instantly. Standing in the doorway was Aqua, tears streaming down her face, leaving Kazuma utterly furious. He scrambled off the bed and stomped over to her. "What on earth are you doing barging into my room? This better be an emergency, or I'm throwing you out." Megumin quickly pulled the blankets over herself as Aqua pointed an accusing finger at Kazuma. "You thief! Did you drink my expensive bottle of wine while I was asleep? How could you?" Kazuma smacked his own forehead in disbelief. "Are you serious? You ruined a perfectly quiet moment just to accuse me of stealing your drink. You neet. You didn't even deny it. Pay me back for my wine." "Wah!" Aqua wailed like a child in the middle of the night. Despite the ridiculous accusation, Kazuma hadn't even touched her bottle. But having their peaceful moment completely destroyed made him too annoyed to argue reasonably. "Pay me back. Pay me back," she whined, flailing her arms dramatically. Kazuma grabbed Aqua by the collar and dragged her out into the hallway to avoid waking up the rest of the neighborhood. Just then, Rimuru passed by holding a wine bottle. Disturbed by the noise, she stopped and looked at the two of them. "It's midnight. Could you guys please keep it down?" Seeing the bottle in Rimuru's hand, Aqua gasped in realization. "It was you. You're the one who drank my wine." Rimuru shrugged nonchalantly. "It was sitting out in the open on the counter, so I assumed it was for everyone. It was pretty good, honestly. Here, there's a little bit left if you want it." Enraged, Aqua ignored the fact that Rimuru possessed cosmic levels of power. Fueled by pure pettiness over her lost beverage, she cast a quick movement buff on her feet and lunged at Rimuru. A loud, chaotic scuffle broke out in the hallway. Bright flashes of divine energy flickered through the corridor as the two clashed, causing the floorboards to tremble. The commotion quickly brought Darkness rushing out of her room to mediate. Darkness grabbed both Aqua and Rimuru by their shoulders, holding them apart. "Stop this at once. Let me go. She has to pay for drinking my special vintage." Aqua barked. Rimuru defended herself. "I told you, it was an honest mistake. you greedy alcoholic. Aqua broke free from darkness's grip and tried to pounce again, but Kazuma stepped directly between them. Enough! Kazuma shouted, exerting whatever authority he had left. Nobody is destroying the house tonight. It's late, so go back to your rooms and we will settle this tomorrow. Aqua huffed indignantly. Darkness, tell her this isn't fair. She drank my entire bottle. Kazuma shook his head. We will discuss it in the morning. Go to bed. Aqua stomped off toward her room, grumbling the entire way. Rimuru just chuckled softly and turned her attention to Kazuma. So, what were you two doing in there before Aqua barged in? Kazuma froze, trying to come up with a normal excuse. Before he could speak, Darkness peeked through the open doorway and spotted Megumin resting under the covers. Darkness gasped, her face flushing crimson. Oh my, were you two having a heart-to-heart talk in the dark? The romantic tension is overwhelming. As Darkness started rambling nervously to herself, Rimuru decided she had seen enough and quietly slipped away down the hall. Kazuma, overwhelmed with embarrassment, quickly closed his bedroom door and let out a long sigh. Aqua POV. That's it. I am done letting that newcomer push me around. I complained loudly in my room. I tried to be patient and act like a proper senior deity, but she has no respect. Determined to get Rimuru reprimanded for entering this realm unannounced, I sat on the floor, closed my eyes, and channeled my divine focus toward the celestial network. Eris! Can you hear me? There's a strange girl down here causing all sorts of trouble. Send someone to deal with her right now. A brilliant flash of divine light filled the room, forming a glowing magic circle on the floor. When the light faded, Eris appeared alongside an unfamiliar deity. Hello, Aqua-san. We haven't been formally introduced, but my name is a start, the lively goddess said politely. Eris let out a heavy sigh, her shoulders slumping. Eris, are you aware that another goddess is wandering around down here? I demanded. Eris rubbed her temples. Yes, Aqua-senpai. I am aware. Our superiors in the Celestial Council are also aware. In fact, that's why we are here. I blinked. Wait. Why are you looking at me like that? Before Eris could answer, Rimuru came strolling down the hallway, holding a glass of juice. She stopped when she saw the glowing magic circle in my room. To my complete shock, both Eris and Astarte immediately bowed respectfully toward Rimuru. Eris spoke softly, "Good evening, my lord. Forgive our sudden intrusion into your vacation." Hey! Why are you bowing to her? I yelled, flabbergasted. She's just some random newcomer. You're embarrassing yourselves. Astarte's cheerful expression vanished, replaced by an icy, serious glare. Watch your tongue, Aqua-san. You have no idea who you are addressing. I scoffed. Oh, please? She drank my wine and stole my spotlight. What could she possibly be? Eris interrupted me with a grave tone. The goddess of water, Aqua, alongside the void dragon, Rimuru Tempest, are hereby summoned to the High Pantheon by order of the Senior Council. We are here to escort you both. My entire body froze solid. The void dragon. My mind went completely blank. The void dragon wasn't just a deity, it was a legendary, primordial existence spoken of in ancient celestial scriptures, a being that existed before realms were formed. Rimuru looked at my terrified expression and chuckled softly. Well, since Sile's cover is blown anyway, I suppose I should introduce myself properly. I am Rimuru Tempest, the void dragon. A cold shiver ran straight down my spine. I've been yelling at a primordial force of creation over a bottle of wine. Before I could faint from sheer panic, Eris stepped onto the magic circle and activated the teleportation spell, dragging Rimuru and me into the light. Kazuma POV. The next morning, I woke up early. Megumin was sitting on the edge of the bed, rubbing her shoulders with a yawn. Kazuma, my shoulders are so stiff today, Megumin murmured softly. Probably from all the traveling we did yesterday, I replied, stretching my arms. My legs are aching too. She looked at me shyly from under her bangs. You didn't do anything strange while I was sleeping last night, right? I cleared my throat, keeping a completely straight face. Megumin, if I wanted to have a serious conversation with you, I would do it while you're awake so we can actually talk properly. Smack! You pervert! Darkness told me you always say smooth things to cover up your embarrassment, she yelled, her face turning red. Hey! Don't listen to Darkness. She views the world through a super weird lens. I argued back defensively. I have complete respect for you, all right. Megumin pouted for a moment, but then her expression softened. She leaned over and gave me a gentle hug, whispering softly into my shoulder, I know. I just get nervous sometimes. My heart did a quick flip. I wrapped my arms around her and smiled. It's fine. We have plenty of time. We pulled back and looked at each other. The room was quiet, and the mood was actually pleasant for once. I leaned in slightly, and Megumin closed her eyes. Yes. This is it. A normal, romantic moment. Thump. Crash. The wooden wardrobe in the corner suddenly tipped over, slamming onto the floorboards. Out tumbled Darkness, drenched in sweat and red-faced, holding a notepad. She scrambled to her feet, avoided our glares entirely, and bolted out the door like a track star. Wait, Darkness! It's not what you think! Megumin yelled, leaping off the bed to chase her down the hallway. I collapsed onto the mattress, staring at the ceiling in complete disbelief. Why can't I ever have a normal day? I noticed the house was unusually quiet. Normally, Aqua would be yelling about breakfast or complaining about her hangover by now, but there wasn't a peep coming from her room. She probably passed out after drinking last night, I thought, deciding not to bother checking on her. Rimuru POV. We materialized in a grand, celestial hall illuminated by stellar light. Seated upon a towering throne at the end of the hall was a grand figure wearing a crown of stars, the chief overseer of this divine realm, Zeus. He wasn't the Zeus from Earth's Greek mythology, but rather the celestial administrator governing the star systems of this dimension. Through Sile's analysis, I knew something about these local deities that they didn't realize I knew. Despite calling themselves gods, their origin stemmed from high-ranking angelic essences that had dispersed across the multiverse ages ago. They established hierarchies and managed lower mortal realms, but none of them possessed the power of true primordial creators like Veldanava. Still, they performed their duties diligently, and I respected the order they maintained. Zeus stepped down from his dais and approached me, bowing respectfully. Great creator of the void, we welcome you to our realm. We are honored by your presence. I chuckled lightly. Thank you. I hope my unexpected visit didn't cause too much panic among your council. The surrounding deities offered polite, nervous laughter. They were clearly walking on eggshells around me, aware of the sheer gap in our power. With a wave of his hand, Zeus shifted the surroundings into a private dimensional sanctuary reserved for higher beings. Long banquet tables appeared, laden with celestial fruits, rare meats, and divine beverages. A stunning cosmic display filled the sky above, showing colliding galaxies forming beautiful celestial art. It was a welcoming feast in my honor. Eris and Astarte bowed to me before joining the other deities, while Aqua stood frozen beside me, still too terrified to speak. I raised a glass of divine nectar toward Zeus. This is quite an impressive setup. I appreciate the hospitality. Zeus smiled, visibly relieved by my relaxed demeanor. To receive praise from an absolute existence is the highest honor. Since my vacation in Axel had hit a brief quiet spot, attending this celestial gathering turned out to be a fun distraction. I decided to enjoy the feast and observe how these deities managed their universes. A little divine sightseeing was a fine way to spend the evening.